Oh, look at that. So creamy. Chicken tortilla soup, or it was supposed to be chicken tortilla soup, but that's all right though. I just kind of threw some stuff together and made it my own thing. And also, this shot was taken several days after I made the soup. By this time, I was out of tortillas, green onions, and cilantro. I combined a lot of recipes today to make that chicken tortilla soup. I think I looked at like 10 different recipes, and one of them just wasn't sitting right with me, or I liked elements that they did. I just took what I wanted to do and I threw it together. Hey y'all, welcome to another video. It is the well-dressed woman, aka Portia, and today we are doing something a little different. Of course, as you guys know, I have a deep love for the home. Today we are not decorating. Today we are going to cook. And you guys, I decided to make chicken tortilla soup. I've never made chicken tortilla soup. I like chicken tortilla soup. I wanted to know how to make it. So I looked up a few different recipes, and I decided to take and pull what I wanted. And the soup came out really, really good, you guys. But I have to say, I think it was I leaned more toward a southwestern soup, right? But anyways, look, we'll get into that later. But here I am. I like to make my own chicken broth. It's so much more flavorful than, the chicken broth in the store. No offense to Swanson, but it's just, it's not what I like. So basically, in a pot, I have some drumsticks, some thighs. I have some onions, some green onions, bell peppers. I have in garlic powder, onion powder, chicken bouillon, a little Lowry seasoning salt, and also some of the garlic salt. I don't know who makes that garlic salt, and some pepper. I'm trying to think if I missed anything. Green onions, regular onions, bell peppers. Yeah, usually when I make broth, I always include celery, but celery definitely gives me Thanksgiving vibes. I usually make turkey broth for the dressing, and I always have celery, and it just smells so good. But since I was doing chicken tortilla soup, I did not use celery. So here I am. I've already cut up the onions, and I'm sauteing them in oil, maybe about a teaspoon and a half. You guys, I did not measure, okay? Not really. I have my own system of measuring, but it's not real measuring. As you can see, I'm putting in the Lowry's right here. Maybe I can try to see who makes this. I think McCormick, maybe. That's the garlic salt that I use. But anyways, I forgot to put it in earlier in the pot, and so I just remembered, and I was throwing it in there. So I'm getting these onions nice and soft. I just threw in the garlic, and as you know, if you are going to be sauteing onions and garlic, always throw the garlic in last, because garlic burns. It burns quickly. So make sure you saute your onions first, get those nice and soft, and then throw in the garlic. So so many people have so many things to say about paprika. And you know what? I have to agree. For me, paprika doesn't really have a taste. Smoked paprika, on the other hand, it definitely has that smoky flavor. But I still use it. If a recipe calls for paprika, I still use it. Maybe it's just for the coloring, whatever. We use it. I'm throwing in I think I used about 3 tablespoons of smoked paprika, 3-ish tablespoons of the chili powder. Here's some oregano. I'm trying to look. I'm trying to look like y'all. How much is that? That might be about a tablespoon. Yeah, I would say it's probably about a tablespoon. And so I'm creating like a paste, and here's my dog. Oh my gosh. I created like a paste. And so, you know, it was getting a little thick. I just added in a little bit of the oil to loosen it up. So I'm adding in cumin. I want to say that was also about 3 tablespoons. And so I'm just mixing it up. You know what they say on the TV, let it bloom. I don't really know what that means, but if that means keep stirring it, you know, so more flavor comes out, that's what I'm going to do. The recipe that I was following, and I actually do break down why I did everything I did in the end, because I'd used a whole lot of recipes. It called for like 1 packet of Sazon, right? And so I mixed that in. Now for the rest, as you can see, most of the time I put in a seasoning and I left it alone, and then I stirred it up. Then I added the next seasoning. I was layering it, right? That's what I typically do for like specialty seasonings. But for me, whenever I throw in like onion powder, garlic powder, Lawry seasoning, salt, any of those kinds of seasonings that are, you know, I think I call those like staples, my general staples, I'll throw those all in together. But if I'm using like chili powder, if I'm using cumin, I usually throw that in and let that, you know, soak in by itself first, and I layer those flavors. So now my chicken broth is done, and so I am just pouring it through the colander into my pot, and as you can see, that's my chicken. All the things that were in there. You see the bell pepper. That's what all of that is. I'm gonna take this to the side in a second, and I'm gonna, you know, let it cool because it's very, very hot, and I'm going to pull off the chicken, separating it from, you know, the bone, the gristle, the skin. You know, you don't want any of that in the soup. Let me tell you something. I was taught to make sure you tasted your food along the way, and there have been many times where I did not. I was just cooking and was not tasting the food along the way. And a lot of times, if I've cooked something for, a whole lot of times, I may not taste it as much, but I was definitely like pretty much almost after every seasoning or every major, add, I would go back and taste the soup. I just kind of wanted to see what each element was adding to the pot. As you guys saw, I dropped in a tortilla shell. Now, I bet you're wondering, why did you drop that in there? Because, it's going to be all soggy. I dropped that tortilla shell. I saw one lady do that. I dropped that tortilla shell in at the beginning because by the time this finishes cooking, that tortilla shell should be completely dissolved. And once it dissolves, all of that flavor should be in the pot. So as you guys can see, I added in a full can of black beans, kidney beans, and now I am adding in some of those Rotel tomatoes. I will try my best to put the descriptions and the measurements in the description box. Y'all, this was just more of a cook with me, not necessarily me teaching you how to cook. So, but I'll still try to share. And so I went back in and added the rest of the black beans because basically I like beans, and when I was pulling the spoon through, I would see how many beans were on the spoon, and it wasn't enough for me. So I went in and added the rest of those black beans. Here is this smelled so good. I'd actually never cooked with this before, and I had it. You guys wouldn't believe this. All of these ingredients, I actually already had in my pantry from various recipes. And so, going back to the no buy year or low spend year, I wanted to make sure that I started with my pantry first when it comes to preparing meals. So all of these ingredients I actually already had. The only thing that I had to do was buy the chicken and the green onions and the cilantro, but everything else was already in my kitchen and refrigerator. So I was very, very happy about that. You guys saw me mashing up you know, what was in the pot. I'll talk about that later in the video, because I actually, like I said, I go through and explain what elements I picked from all of the different recipes and why. So I added in the corn, just adding in some green chili peppers. Right now I am adding in green onions and adding in cilantro, and some more lime juice. You guys saw me add in some early on in the process. I'm adding in some sugar right here because it was really savory and I just kind of wanted to balance that out. I don't want it to be sweet, but I just wanted it to be a little less savory. So again, I'm going in and I'm tasting it to see if that did the job. And well, y'all, this is bomb. This is really good. So now I have shredded, and I don't like shredded chicken. I mean, I don't not like it. I just prefer chunky chicken. But you know, I eat shredded chicken. It's just when I'm preparing a meal, even when I make my enchiladas, I don't really shred it. I like to have it a little chunky. So I'm gonna go back in and taste it after adding the chicken, just because the chicken has its own flavor from boiling and, you know, from the chicken broth. All right, so I basically, these are regular corn tortilla shells. I just cut them up into strips. And so I have my oil over here that is warming up, right? It ain't warming up because I didn't turn it on. What you doing to me? Dang. Chill for a second. Stir this because make sure nothing sticks to the bottom. I want that. I'm gonna use my slotted spoon for this. This oil should be hot. I actually think it might be a little too hot. Oh no, it's okay. Let's see. The back. So they all going in there and boom. You know what? I'm gonna season these in here. A little bit. I sure am. A little seasoning in there. I'm gonna put a little onion powder. Garlic powder, little onion powder. Yep, I'll do that. So y'all already know what time it was. My phone died. That's why we just had to jump to the next clip because by the time my phone charged up, y'all, them tortillas was done. So I couldn't get a shot, you know, taking the tortillas out. And even, you know, honestly, I even forgot to go back and record, you know, the final shot of the soup with the green onions, with the cilantro, with the cheese on top, and, you know, and the sour cream. So this is like 3 days later, you guys. I was going to visit my mom, and so I packed up some soup for her. And by this time, y'all, I had ran out of cilantro and green onions, and I did have some more tortillas, but I wasn't about to cook them, you know, for this little bit of bowl that was left. So yeah, so I just, you know, I was like, well, I need something. So that's what you're seeing here. But again, y'all, this wasn't necessarily a like a cooking video. I just needed to cook, and I brought y'all along for the ride, you know. And I was like, well, I can explain what I was doing, you know. But you know, I'm not no YouTube chef the way that they be doing it, because they do it. You understand? But no, I was just trying to meal prep. But also, yes, your girl did intend to meal prep. That was the goal, okay? When I cut up them onions, I cut up a whole lot of onions so that I could have enough onions for, the rest of everything that I was cooking. But when I tell you that your girl did not meal prep at all, but in fact prepped a meal, as in singular. Yeah, no, I did not meal prep. I tried to have some kind of method to the madness. All of the spices that I don't use a whole lot, I try to put on the second shelf. And seasonings, I try to put those on the second shelf, like this. I don't even know why this is down. I must have grabbed it by accident. Salmon, cedar plank seasoning. And I just need to wipe these down because your girl be flinging and swinging these spices when I get going. I don't use the Sazon a whole lot, but I still keep it on the oh shoot, nope, that's not the right one. Oh, this is the one. I still keep it on the first shelf. Smoked paprika, I do not use a whole lot. In the summertime when I make a lot of deviled eggs, I use it a little more. I don't always use smoked paprika either on deviled eggs. Sometimes. And also, it's so funny, I have used it's so funny because I remember one time I ran out of liquid smoke for my barbecue sauce, and so I actually used some of the smoked paprika in the barbecue sauce, because really, I was just looking for that smoky flavor. It did the job. It did the job. So, hey, sometimes you gotta be creative. I actually think I was missing something I combined a lot of recipes today to make that chicken tortilla soup. I think I looked at like 10 different recipes, and one of them just wasn't sitting right with me, or I liked elements that they did. I just took what I wanted to do and I threw it together, That's what I do that a lot. Especially when it's my first time cooking something. Like, for example, I use majority of the spices that I used, I pulled from Mr. Make It Happen, oh babe, I love you so much. And so, but there was one recipe I saw where the lady early on in the process, once she introduced like the chicken broth, she dropped the chicken blah blah blah. When she was early on in the process, she dropped the tortilla shell in the liquid, like the broth and all the sauces, and she let it dissolve down. And I was like, that's genius. I'm gonna take that, because I feel like that really allowed for that tortilla flavor to like really get into like the nitty-gritty of every part of that sauce. Even though we do have the tortilla shells that I'm gonna put on top, I really think that leveled it up, So that, like, he doesn't really, like, I love corn, so he used like a cup of corn. I used 2 cans of corn, A lot of the people, the recipes that I saw, people used only black beans, and Mr. Make It Happen, he used black beans and kidney beans, so I used both of those. I use that mashing method. That's something I learned from when I make from when I make other like bean soups, especially when I make black eyed peas. Like I really like to mash up the beans and, you know, whatever else is in there, because that's just more flavoring that's kind of being like introduced into the rest of the pot. So just mashing it up, and it gives it a thicker consistency. So that's great, right? So I did that. And then I also, one thing that I did, and I pulled this from when I make these Southwestern stuffed peppers, because a lot of the ingredients, you know, crossed over. The black beans, the corn, the cilantro, the green onions. So, and Mr. Make It Happen, I don't think he used green onions at all. But if it's a Latino dish, I got to have, you know, green onions and cilantro. So, you know, I think he topped his with the cilantro, and maybe toward the end he might have used some cilantro. So what I did was, because, you know, again, cooking, whenever I cook with green onions and cilantro, I like to have the, you know, the sauce or whatever it is, I like those onions, the onion and the cilantro, to really like marinate in the dish, right? So I always put some in so that I can be in there the whole time and marinating. But then, you know, because, you know, it's nice to have a little crisp to it. Not necessarily crisp, but, you know, like when you look at it, you can recognize what it is. Because when you leave it in there the whole time, by the end of the, you know, by the time you finish cooking it, it's like you just see little green specks. You don't know what that is. So, you know, I'm adding more of the freshness of the cilantro and the green onion more at the end. And then, you know, when you see it in the actual dish, you can recognize it because it's not all broken down. So a lot of times when I'm cooking with cilantro and green onions, I'll add them in twice, in the beginning and in the end. It's just my little thing. And then there was one other thing. So I saw one lady do this. A lot of people topped their tortilla soup with like slices of lime. I saw one lady introduce the lime early on, you know, in the process, in the cooking process, when she was just kind of like, she had her raw spices, her raw seasonings, and she was, you know, sauteing them in the olive oil. So I put it in then, again, to kind of marinate it, right, so that it's cooking throughout the whole process. But kind of like with the cilantro and the green onion, I introduced it at the end as well to give it a new fresh flavor. So I did that. And one of the things that I really liked about Mr. Make It Happen's video, which is why I chose his, is because I really liked how this is what they say. I mean, I ain't no scientist, I haven't studied it, but this is what a lot of cooks say. You know, when you put in the olive oil in the beginning and you're cooking up those onions, and you're adding in the garlic and, you know, all the other spices, you're really packing on the spice. So you saw I had like a little paste going, and so I was really packing in that flavor before I introduced any water. Because to me, like, I season water. You guys saw me season the water when I was making the broth. But like this way, to me, there's something about it that makes so much more sense, you know, when making a soup, to really pack on the flavor in the beginning before you introduce the liquid. I'm not talking about broth, that's a whole different thing. So I really like that he did that. And then, you know, I made my chicken broth. He mentioned in the video that you could make your own broth if you wanted to. And so, you know, I always prefer homemade chicken broth. Like, you will almost, if a recipe calls for chicken broth, like, and if I don't have any chicken to make the homemade chicken broth, first of all, I will almost always make the homemade chicken broth if I have chicken. If I don't have chicken, I'm gonna put some of this chicken bouillon in a measuring cup, I know what the color should look like when I add water to it. Like I know like the tint that I like to, you know, to have the flavor that I like. But you can just taste it too, you know. By this time, I just know what I'm looking for when I add the better than the chicken bouillon. He used better than bouillon in his, and I don't know, there's something about that flavor that I don't like. I only used it once. I think I'll give it another try, but I don't know. It was very potent, which isn't bad. It would be great, probably excellent in soup since it's so potent. But there was something about the flavor, something about the scent that I did not like. So, so I made my chicken broth, and like I said, I like to make chicken broth because it's so much more flavorful that way. And he used rotisserie. I like a rotisserie chicken that he got from the store, you know, to make it fast, to make, you know, you getting home from work.
Nobody got time to always be breaking down chicken.
So yeah, I boiled mine down. I also tried to roast some in the oven on a roast function that I've never used before, and it didn't turn out great. I think that, like I said early in the video, I think when you're roasting that you should really make sure maybe you coat it with olive oil to get that crisp skin, that crisp shiny skin, or some butter or something. What I did, I might as well have baked it. So yeah, so you see I combined a whole lot of recipes together to make this soup. And the kitchen at the moment is clean enough.
Yeah!
You know, once we finish eating and we make some more dishes, and I'll come back in here and give it that final clean, but at least it ain't no mess. You know. Oh shoot, I forgot to clean that. I'll do that later. Oh, it looks amazing. It looks amazing. Oh, here's another thing. So, like if I have something really savory, I have to balance out that savory sweet thing. So I didn't see anybody else do this, but I did add a little sugar to the soup when I was making the sauce. Here's my tip for people because some people hate sweet sauces, right? Especially when you have meat that's being introduced. This goes for people who hate sugar and spaghetti, you know, people who hate. Okay, so let me tell you, this is what I have found, having done it right and having done it wrong. Because I need that balance of sweet and savory. So for example, let me show you how to do this with spaghetti, because some people are like, spaghetti, sugar, spaghetti. No. When you're making the sauce, before you do anything, introduce any kind of meat, that's when you add the sugar. When you're doctoring up the sauce, you put in the Italian seasoning, you put in the pepper, you know, and whatever else you choose to put in your spaghetti sauce. That is when you add the sugar to get it to the taste or the level that you want, right? And you may not want any sugar at all, but if you are going to add sugar, that's when you add it. Do not, and I repeat, don't do this, because I did this when I first started trying to make spaghetti and it was tragic. If you try to add because I had forgot to add the sugar. If you try to add the sugar once the meat is in there and the sugar gets directly on the meat, even if you mix it up, that meat is going to taste sweet, and that is a no. I have done it. Okay, I was like, oh, that's nasty. In the sauce, if you want it to be a little sweeter, that's where you add your sugar, okay? And so the same thing, and that's one of the things, you know, just from cooking that I know. So when I was cooking this, I wanted it to be a little sweeter. I added sugar early on, before the meat was ever introduced. And so when I put in the meat, And I was like, oh, it took away a little of the sweetness, but not so much that I felt like I needed to add more sugar. In the future, now I know to make it just a little sweeter than I actually want it. So that way when I introduce the chicken, you know, it'll be back to what I really want it to be. So yeah, y'all see, now I don't be measuring stuff. Y'all see how I be pouring stuff in my hand? Like, I just kind of know how much a tablespoon is in my hand. So I'll pour up like 1 tablespoon, 2 tablespoons, 3 tablespoons. And so that's just kind of how I, if it says add 4 tablespoons, I'm gonna do 4 palm scoops. Hey, we done made dinner. That's all I got for y'all. But at least this kitchen is clean. My doggy he's walked, he's fed, work is done. You heard? All right, well, thank y'all for hanging out with me. I hope y'all had a good time.